downtown Maysville, and we're going to be learning a lot about our town's history today.
Just wait, you won't believe some of the things you're going to find out about the city you live in.
Such an important part in our history. Different Indians had to adapt to their environment wherever they lived. Here we had woodland Indians in eastern Kentucky, and they were able to hunt for the deer. They were able to kill buffalo for their food source. Lived on the river, so we had plenty of fish, mussels, and things like that. So their houses, because we had so much wood, their houses were made by wood.
So a lot of what happened in Maysville was because of this river, and that's why people would come here, because they could travel in their boats, because back then you didn't have airplanes or cars or trains.
Right.
So they had to go by boat.
After the Revolutionary War, they won land grants to pay them for their participation in the Revolutionary War. So a lot of Maysville is settled by wonderful Revolutionary War soldiers.
Boys and girls, this is a diorama of what Maysville once looked like. There weren't big buildings, they didn't just appear. This is what Maysville started as. So think about downtown right now and what it looks like. This is how it first started.
Right, and they said that Maysville wasn't very large at all, that Washington was much bigger, and that was because they felt like that they were safer from the Indians. John May, who Maysville was named after, was on his way here, and the Indians had a way of trying to trick people to come towards shore, and they would put girls out there that would scream and say, "Help me, help me," and they, we're all wanting to help everybody, so they would go over, and he was killed in an instance like that by an arrow before he even got here. So they named Maysville after John May, who was killed by the Indians. These are all prominent people that helped form our area. You've got Daniel Boone, of course. Daniel Boone lived here for 5 years with his cousin, who is actually buried in our backyard here at the museum. Jacob Boone and Daniel Boone had a tavern down on Front Street, which is where the flood wall is. And was Simon Kenton, of course, who told Daniel Boone all about Kentucky and why he needed to come here. Taverns would have built up because people would have been traveling down the river, and they would have stopped, and they maybe wanted to have a place to spend the night rather than just staying on the boat, and then they would have to have some place to eat. And you'll notice that before we even became a state, we had 462 settlers here. So it was a good place to come, and a lot of immigrants would come. So you'll see a lot of influence from the different immigrants that came in. Germans would come down the river, and it looked so much like where they grew up in Germany that they wanted to settle here because it made them feel like they were home. They bring their traditions with them or their skills, and they start their own businesses. Our land was so fertile. So hemp was grown to make rope, and we were the largest, Mason County was the largest producer of hemp during that time. And they would use Route 68, or the old Buffalo Trace, to come in from the center of Kentucky to come to our landing to put all of their items on boats to go to like Pennsylvania or to go down to New Orleans. We produce so much corn, and we'd use it for silage to feed the pigs and the cows and everything, and we'd use it to eat, but we still had an overabundance of corn. And so instead of rye and all of the things that they usually put in distilled spirits, they put corn. And bourbon is 51% corn. That's one of the things that makes it Kentucky bourbon. And again, you're gonna see how river traffic has changed. You've still got some of your flatboats. You've got your canoes and your skiffs, and now you've got a paddle boat that can take you farther, take more people to get from place to place. And you'll see how the riverfront looked, how it built up. Now, if you come to Maysville and you look down on Front Street, you're gonna see the Lee House. It still stands. And it's gonna be right beside the flood wall. You'll see that Maysville was divided in many ways because we were agricultural, but then there were so many abolitionists. There were many times when the Confederates would come in, Morgan's Raiders, and they would come through and they would plunder and take all of the food sources and everything around. And then the Union soldiers would come in and take over, and they would take all the food sources. One of the things that you can see in Maysville, on Smoky Hollow, as you're coming down the old curvy road, you'll see that apartment complex. Right there was an armory, and it had, of course, guns and gunpowder and everything. So they say that they blew up that armory, and the explosion rocked all of Maysville, broke windows, knocked furniture out on the ground, and there is a spot on the Presbyterian Church where it's knocked out from that explosion. They don't know whether it was a Confederate conspiracy or what, but they think it was because the Beer Bower House at the top of Sutton Street, they were big abolitionists. That whole area where the academy, the old academy was, there were a lot of abolitionists. They said at one time there might have been a tunnel from the Beer Bower House to the Ohio River to come across. That they said that Phillips Folly has a tunnel, and they say that the Lee House has a tunnel, and where they would bring the runaways across. So there would be many more cars, and they would cause ruts in the road. So then they had to develop a way to cover the road, because see, the tires would have changed over time as well, because they had to get over those ruts, and they were so used to being pulled by a horse and buggy that the roads had to change. Well, you had to cover the roads. So when you covered the roads, people could travel farther. So when you traveled farther, you still had to have gasoline wherever you went. So gas stations, filling stations popped up. And because you had filling stations and you could go farther, you could stay out longer. So you had to have a place to stay. So boarding houses and motels and stuff would spring up, and restaurants, because they had to eat. So your economy changed in 1804 because of our location and because our environment had so many wonderful pine trees.
Those native plants that we talked about.
Yes, native plants were so important. And they made ocean-going ships here in Maysville. down at the river park, or you might call it the boat landing or whatever, at the end you'll see a little creek. And because we had such a great environment for those trees and the hemp for the rope and all of the products that could be shipped up and down, it was a great, you know, place to export your goods. They imported the shipbuilders here because it was cheaper to bring those people here than to transport all our wood and our hemp and everything someplace else. So they built 18-ton ships there. And then when the water was at the right height, they could put it into the Ohio River, and they would take it through the falls of the Ohio in Louisville, and then they would go on out to sea. But those ships went as far as Liverpool, Russia, the Caribbean. So, you know, we used our environment again for what we needed at that time, and it provided jobs and security for the people that lived here. Then they built dams, and those dams changed our landform, and the Ohio River became deep enough for transport of boats that could use the paddles, use the motors on through and everything. And when it would rain, then those waters would come up and the area would flood. Again, the environment changed all the time. We're constantly tearing up and trying to improve. So those flood walls protect you now.